point for Crystal Palace. Right now, though, we're going to turn our attention to Leeds United, who had quite a chastening experience, I think it's fair to say, last night against Manchester City. The 7-0 defeat, the joint heaviest defeat in Leeds United history as a Football League and Premier League club in all competitions. You're going back to an 8-1 defeat against Stoke in 1934 and a 7-0 defeat against West Ham in November 1966 that John Giles has never spoken about, but I think tomorrow night we may just need to bring it back up. There was also a game against Arsenal, a 7-0 in September 1979. It was the first time in Marcelo Bielsa's career that he conceded 7 goals in a single match in 568 matches. I'm delighted to be joined on the line by the BBC's Adam Pope. Evening, Adam.
Evening, Nathan.
So there's a lot to go through with Leeds, both on last night and how this season is going, and second season syndrome and the usual question marks about Marcelo Bielsa, particularly with Leeds 16th in the table, just 3 wins from their opening 17 matches, conceded 32 goals. The concern about last night's performance felt that even after 2.5, 3 minutes, while it was still scoreless, that game felt like it was going to finish like a 5 or 6-0 win to Manchester City. I don't remember a Premier League team being that loose that early in any match.
Yeah, Nathan, I've got to agree. And before they scored the first, Bernardo Silva's missed an absolute sitter, hasn't he? And, you know, I tell you, at 2-0, we were all thinking, wow, this has got like 5 at least all over it. And because what City did that was so clever, and we had a former Leeds player with us last night, Andrew Hughes, who's now on the Norwich staff, and of course they were playing last night and losing to Aston Villa, and he was with us in the ground, and he said, just look at what Manchester City are doing here. And it's the angle of the press that he said was so impressive, and what they've done, without getting too technical, they've just forced Leeds, and Melly in particular, into having to kit long and in straight down the throats of Diaz, Stones, who was almost playing as a right winger yesterday, and Laporte. So possession was always with Manchester City, which is something that obviously Leeds aren't used to, because, you know, they tend to dominate possession, certainly in the Championship and to an extent, obviously, in the Premier League. So they just couldn't get out. And because of that, they couldn't lay a glove on them. They couldn't construct anything. It was frightening. Manchester City were absolutely brilliant. For anybody that hasn't seen the game, it was a masterclass. But Leeds were poor. And a few of the goals were sort of unforgivable. I think Nathan Ake's, header from the corner kick, pretty much unopposed, and a couple of others. But ultimately, that could have been 10 or 12, to be quite honest. It was City were that good, but Leeds were way off it. And as you say, Nathan, from second one, the writing was on the wall.
And what's of really great concern is that while a scoreline like that is somewhat out of the ordinary, maybe a performance like that isn't completely out of the ordinary this season. When you look at it last night, is there a systemic issue at Leeds, or actually, can you just simplify this, that you touched on Leeds had no outball? Like, Leeds generally have 2 outballs. One is they give the ball to Calvin Phillips and they go short, and he controls things from that base in midfield, and he has emerged as one of the best central midfielders in English football over the last 2 years. He wasn't there. And up top, they have Patrick Bamford, who probably covers more ground than any number 9 in the Premier League, who even by himself can be a real handful for any defence. And when you take those 2 players out of it, for a team with Leeds resources, there's not a whole lot you can do. Am I being too kind?
No, I think you've pointed to 2 key issues, and Bamford has been missing for 2 months, don't forget. Came back, having played 90 minutes for a 23s game that he should have played 45. We think he's probably just aggravated the hamstring that eventually saw him sort of pull up post the goal he scored against Brentford when he came on for the last few minutes. So there's nothing to do about the celebration that he had or anything like that. But he's been aggravated. He's out for a couple more weeks. So if you take him for a start, the people that have doubted Patrick Bamford have found out in his absence exactly what he does. And you've nailed it there, Nathan. He does the running. He does the press from the beginning. The ball sticks. It doesn't come back into midfield. Where Leeds have lost a lot of ball, or certainly in the early part of the season, in the transition phase, and have been punished, with the turnover there. Calvin Phillips then is obviously a big security blanket too when he plays, and he's going to be out for probably, we're not sure exactly how long, but it's going to be probably at least 2 months with this hamstring injury, which we understand he's had an operation on. So they miss his shield, they miss his creative ability, which is often with a long pass, which, to be fair, anybody else that plays in the defensive midfield role that he does doesn't really have that diagonal on him, on them like he does. Plus, he sees things so quickly too, and he's a good destroyer as well as a creator too. So they haven't got that person. Adam Forshaw has done brilliantly since coming back in, having had 2 years out. But last night against the top world quality players, it was too much for him, and they were swamped in midfield, to be fair. And without Phillips, I'm not saying they would have got anything out of the game, but with Phillips in there, it makes a big difference. So there's two big misses there. But Nathan, there's four, and now another player in Jamie Shackleton is going to be missing as well, because they have those injuries on top. So 7-0 last night, and 7 men down, plus the suspension going into the weekend.
And Arsenal to come on Saturday, and Liverpool to come a week later. What was Marcelo Bielsa's reaction to last night? Was there any acknowledgement that he could have done something differently?
Well, as always, it's very mea culpa with Bielsa, and he takes it completely upon himself, the way that the game was set up, the way that they failed to deliver, the fact that they execute and everything they tried didn't work. So he basically said, I knew what to expect from Manchester City. He actually said, it wasn't that they played so well, it's just that we played the worst we've played in my tenure. And I'll be honest with you, Nathan, I think, although the scoreline was horrific, I think it's worse seeing them lose 1-0 to not a very good Southampton side. You sort of expected that could have happened last night to any team, and it happened to Leeds because it was the perfect storm. Leeds playing badly, Manchester City being brilliant. So in that sense, I think, yes, I understand why he's taking it on the chin, and to an extent that could be protecting his players. But to be fair, the players, and Stuart Dallas was one of them, apologised to their fans straight away last night and said, look, we're hurting. We feel very responsible for this. The players just didn't, in 2 or 3 of the goals, just aren't doing what they're meant to be doing. So in that sense, where did he get it wrong? I think the fact that at 3-0 down at half time, you've got to say, do you come out and do the same things again? They did tweak it a bit. I spoke to Luke Ayling today, who's the acting captain in the absence of Liam Cooper, who's injured. And he said, we did try to change it around a little bit, but it just didn't work. So it's not like he just stuck with the same plan.
Yeah.
But in essence, the style is the same. He's still going to be on the front foot, Nathan. And, this is where he gets criticised for, that inflexibility at times to maybe just to adapt to the situation.
Is that criticism around Ellen Road? Are the natives restless in any way with Bielsa?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the mood is this, that most fans think they're going to stay up. And nearly all fans just revere him and think, look, yes, we know he's stubborn, but he delivers more times than he doesn't, and he's done wonderful things for the football club. So in that sense, fans are still behind him. There are the trolls, and thankfully he's not on social media, although he does watch and listen and read everything, who are calling for his head, like they were calling for Mateusz Klik's head, after the penalty that he gave away at the end of the game against Chelsea, which cost them, a point in the end. So there is that faction as well. The big criticism, and I think it's one where the landscape has changed, where his defence is getting less, is when, and I did ask him this question last night, Nathan, I said, look, you've got Jamie Shackleton now injured as well, on top of 6 others at present. You have a suspension to Firpo. Okay, it's a one-match one, and it's this weekend. But he's got another 6 players, all right, 2 of them are injured, who are on 4 yellow cards. Now, if any of them pick up those cards before the end of the game against Liverpool in 2 games' time, then there's another one-match ban. So January, surely, would it not be wise to bring in players, even if they weren't your ideal targets, and they don't meet his criteria, Nathan, which are affordability, availability, and that they're better than what they've got already? Is there not a compromise to be had to say, right, we're in an extraordinary situation here. Leeds need some bodies in the building, and I don't think he's going to budge on that particularly. It doesn't mean they're not going to have activity in there, but that's where he's getting criticised for, particularly at the moment, Nathan.
And does he listen to anyone above? Because this isn't just about Bielsa's views on football and the type of player he wants. Like, staying in the Premier League is transformative for a club like Leeds. They simply cannot afford to be relegated. So are there people in footballing positions or in management positions around the club who can influence him and force him into buying players that he doesn't want?
Well, I don't think you can force him into doing anything. And the success he's had is that he's been allowed to sort of run the football side himself. But it would be unfair to say that he doesn't have a collaborative approach to a lot of what he does. For example, Nathan, when after a game, he said to me a few years ago, I think there's 15 of them that sit down in terms of his sort of inner circle, and they mark each player. And everybody's got to sort of justify if their mark is, say, well outside the mean, if you like, or is and usually, low or higher than anybody else's. So I think in that sense, there is a collaborative approach. Obviously, his is the final and most decisive decision. When it comes to players, he trusts Victor Orta, the sporting director, to go out and get the right players or the right type of players for him. And I think there's a good relationship there. It can be sparky, but I think it is healthy and productive. What I don't think he'll listen to is being told from on high as to you have to buy players. I think he might struggle with that if they're not the ones that he feels are fit. I don't think he's a man for compromise. He has his standards, he had his morals, and they're to be admired. So if he really doesn't want a player, he will not have a player. And this is just my opinion, I don't think he would appreciate being told, you have to buy some players and you must play them. I just don't see him working in that way.
I think the last time we spoke was right at the start of the year, and it might have been even after the Manchester United defeat where they lost 6-2, and it didn't feel a world away from last night's performance, except that either side of it they'd scored 5 against Newcastle and 5 against West Brom. And I think Bielsa at the time's point was, well, you don't get the 5 goals in those games unless you play the way you did against Manchester United. You can't just turn it on and turn it off, this high intensity, high press that even last night when they're 3-0 down, when they win the ball back, everybody goes forward. That is his and has been his way of playing football and his footballing philosophy for years, and it's bloody exciting to watch. I'm just wondering, is there any sense that if they do find themselves in a relegation battle that somehow he might become more pragmatic?
Well, that's really interesting. I think that the great point you make there, Nathan, is why does he keep doing this? Why has he always wanted to do this? Yes, it's a philosophy in how the game should be played, and it's beautiful to watch. But also he says, if you don't, going back to something he said right at the beginning of his tenure, if you've got a way of playing and you believe in it and everybody buys into it, that has to be a strong way of playing. It has to be a strong system. And if it isn't, and you can change it easily, then it's weak. So why would you change something that is strong? Why would you not just try to do that thing better? So ultimately, he isn't going to change the way he plays. And there's lots of factors that goes into that as well. And it's about entertainment, it's about being enjoyed, it's about playing it in what we would supposedly call the right way. Not that he disses anybody else, providing that they play their system within the laws of the game. You know what I mean? But it is a beautiful game under him. So that isn't going to change. So I don't think there's going to be a compromise. And you're right. You make great points there, Nathan. Either side of those heavy defeats, there were some big wins as well. And don't forget, Nathan, that 6-2 against Manchester United, mad as it sounds, that could have been 10-10 that game.
Yeah.
They were in it. Believe it or not, they were in it for large parts of that game. Obviously, the one this season at Old Trafford, they were back in it with Luke Haley's wonderful goal. But then within a couple of minutes, it got away from them again. So, yeah, it's the opportunity cost of playing brilliant and often winning football. But when they're slightly off it or largely off it, where they have been this season, then you've seen the draws and you've seen the defeats and you've seen a season that really should have been last season, Nathan. Yeah. This is the one. And the second season, I don't believe in it, really, to be quite honest with you, Nathan. I think the facts are, as we were told by Angus Kinnear, the chief executive, you're as likely to go down in your second season as your first season. There's a 50% chance. That seems to be the stat. Yeah. So I don't believe it's any different this time around, particularly than the last time around, in terms of their chance of going down.
And my view on that sort of changed a few years ago. I remember having a conversation with John Walters when he was at Burnley, and you remember Burnley finished 7th and had this brilliant season, and the next year had a real struggle and were in a relegation scrap, albeit it wasn't second season syndrome at that stage. And I was asking him at the time, like, what's gone wrong? Like, what has gone wrong? Everybody's questioning Sean Dyche's methods. Are the players sick of him? Have they just bored of this sort of Route 1 football and all that? And he said, well, actually, if you look at when we came 7th, I think they won 14 matches that season by a single goal, or got a huge amount of their points by very tight margin. He said that all those little things that went for them one season just didn't go for them the next season, and there wasn't a huge difference actually in terms of ability or in terms of performance or belief in the manager or anything. That actually little margins here and there go against you, a bit of momentum is lost, and suddenly you find yourself in a relegation scrap. Is there a bit of a sense of Leeds with that because they're such a giant club, we're all going to say that they're in crisis mode, or actually it's not that far off where they were last season.
Yeah, I think, look, Leeds is never far away from a crisis, is it, in terms of how it's viewed? It's DEFCON 1 straight away after a defeat, isn't it? That's just how the nature of the beast. But no, not crisis. I think people aren't full of confidence, quite clearly. They're not, and not just because of last night. But I do think it's very, when we work, Nathan, with ex-players or who are still in the game and still in Premier League football. And I'm talking to people like Sean Derry, who's at Crystal Palace now, ex-Leeds player, Andrew Hughes, who's been in the Premier League with Huddersfield and now at Norwich as well. It's really interesting when you hear these players talk about Leeds and they say they're in a great position. They're in a great position. And okay, after 90 minutes last night, you might think otherwise they dropped the place because of goal difference. But they say these guys are in a really, really good position. They feel that the recruitment in essence has been good. The club has had enough funds to get them into the Premier League and are doing their best to keep them there. And it looks like they're going to, hopefully take off again if the 49ers keep progressing in terms of their ownership and eventually will take over, you would have thought, within the next couple of years. Ground expansion. And you think the club is in a really, really good position. It is about staying in the Premier League this season. And at the moment, despite this horrible run of fixtures, which you pointed out, Arsenal, who are playing really well and should have been well clear tonight at half-time.
Just gone 2-0 up, Arsenal.
Was it just 2? Oh, right. Okay. I mean, they've been so good value. I mean, that's proper Arsenal. The goal against Southampton the other day, I think the first goal today we thought was excellent too. They're on form. So Leeds are looking at maybe the Arsenal game be the one where they pick up the points, or fans are anyway. Because Liverpool, a bit like last night, you think, wow, well, anything could happen, couldn't it? So you're looking at Villa and Burnley at the beginning of January, which I know is when the window opens, but then you're thinking, wow, they could be really tense games and could be in some essence the sort of defining fixtures of setting the tone, certainly for the rest of the season and where it's going to be played out for Leeds.
And just to wrap up then, we touched on possible incomings, and a lot will depend on what Bielsa wants to do there. Maybe injury developments with Patrick Bamford may influence what he does. In terms of outgoings, like Rafinha has again been a real star this season, and everything about him just oozes class, and you feel it's only a matter of time. I'm not going to use the word big club, but goes to a club that are contending for Champions League positions. Is that the feeling around Elland Road, that it is just a matter of time before Rafinha goes?
Nathan, I think you've got to be realistic, and nobody's expecting him or Calvin Phillips really to be there beyond the summer. If they could get through, I mean, obviously Calvin's injured for what we think will be a few months at the moment, so that will stall anything. But Rafinha in particular, I've got to say he's the best I've ever seen. This guy is phenomenal. In terms of watching Leeds in the last sort of 15 years or so, Nathan, he's that good. And
right.
For under less than 20 million, this guy is going to go for a fortune. But you're right, he turned 25 yesterday. He'll want Champions League football, as will Calvin Phillips. Let's face it, they're not going to get it with Leeds in the next 12 months, are they? So Leeds is the move before the next move at the moment. That's where they are as a club. They haven't got the rich oligarch or the country that owns them at the moment. They have a millionaire, and they have the 49ers that are coming in and putting money too, and they will build towards that, you would hope. But in essence, like most clubs, they will probably have to sell. And I think they're confident I would say the couple have said they're confident of doing deals to try and keep players or look like they're keeping players at the club. But at the end of the day, they're protecting themselves going forward, I would say. So, and those players, put it this way, I don't think Leeds fans would begrudge them moving when the time was suitable, which hopefully would be not until the summer or maybe until after the World Cup. And as long as they don't go to Old Trafford, I think that's the other key factor.
Well, as always, they only like it when it's going the other way. When are they building that John Giles statue outside Elland Road?
Oh man, well, it would be nice if they did it when he can come and see it himself, wouldn't it? Eh?
Exactly.
So yeah, I mean, I tell you, it's funny. I never got the pleasure of seeing him play. I've had the pleasure of meeting him, Nathan, at Elland Road a few years ago, and this one thing a friend of mine said to me a little while ago. He said he was the best player he ever saw. He said he was phenomenal. People talk about Bobby Collins having the winning mentality, Eddie Gray's, Lorimer, everything, but people say John Giles was the best. He could do it all. And what an accolade that is to have in a Leeds shirt, eh?
Certainly is. We'll leave it at that. John Giles will be with us 7:30 tomorrow night. As always, we'll be talking about that 7-0 defeat, which he never brings up. So I think it'll be a perfect opportunity for a bit. And we know what his memory's like. He'll remember every single minute, and he'll remember who made the mistakes more than anything. It won't be himself. It won't have been himself or Bremner, that's for sure. Adam, great stuff as always. Lovely to talk to you.
You too. Happy Christmas to you all.
You too. Quick break, and we'll give you the full times. Arsenal looks set to beat West Ham 2-0 up in injury time.
Football